So this video is going to be exploring the premise to see if gamers have actually learned a valuable lesson in the past few years. Because in the past few years, we've seen the gaming industry change in a sense. It's been trying to do a whole lot of different foreign stuff that's not really at the core of gaming. And then hopefully somewhere at the end of this little opinion piece, I'll probably see if I can have enough time to pitch in some possible solutions, or perhaps, show some roadmaps that game companies used back in the day when everybody was hungry and trying to get a loyal customer base and a community before the greed started to erode what was, once a very enterprising adventure, which is the journey of making games and, finding a community of gamers who enjoy your game because you've made the game from the very bottom of your creative and artistic heart. And so if you look at the past few years, gamers seem to have been somewhat, betrayed or, cheated or maybe lied to. All kinds of things have just happened with these gaming companies. And I think the fact that the relationship between customers and gaming developers / publishers is kind of on a bro level. It's quite informal. It's not like, something where a lot of your customers, if you were perhaps developing something like maybe Photoshop, your customers don't really know who your developers are. They see the name of, how it is when you launch Photoshop, you see the names of the people who develop it, but they don't really know who they are. They've never really seen many of them in, interviews and all that. But here in the gaming industry, people go to E3, they shake hands with them, some people talk with them, they go to studios and they, go to preview events and all that. So it's a whole different landscape and it's its own thing. And with this, I feel like the gaming companies have found ways to subvert gamers, and I think it's because of the relationship that we have developed with them, whichever the proxy is. And largely this has created some kind of a strange dynamic in the gaming scene. So let me give you a few examples, and we'll look at some of the things in the industry going on currently. So I want to start out with Fallout 76, and I'm not here to bash any game. I'm just here to talk about lessons learned. So Fallout 76, before it was released, the studio released this letter saying, hey fans, we're launching this new product. It's something that we're doing for the first time. And so some things might not work well, but we enjoy the passion, blah, blah, blah. If you want to read the letter, I read the whole thing in a whole video. It's here on my channel somewhere, so you can go ahead and look for it. But this letter, in hindsight now, looks like it was a warning saying, hey, don't say we didn't tell you. This game is going to be a roller coaster in a sense. And then when the game came out and then it was discovered that a lot of things were broken, Bethesda actually made this, commitment saying that some things were going to be fixed post-launch. And I think maybe the problems were seen during the beta or something like that. But then it happened to be that now, as we're looking at it, Bethesda is actually on the hook for actually refunding money to players, because apparently it is being discovered that they may have, and I think somebody mentioned this, there's a document here that's actually to that effect, that Bethesda may have knowingly misled its fans. And so this is coming out because I think of how broken and how bad Fallout 76 was, and it just aired out a lot of their dirty laundry. And then, you've seen some other things in some other, contexts that are similar to this, but no one has been forced to, or no one has been sued so heavily where consumers have complained and they've been, and the company has been pretty much strong-armed to refund money of consumers. So what is the lesson learned? I think the lesson learned is, as gamers who are averaging 35 years, we really have to control our inner child. And, this is the part where this is what developers and this is what publishing companies usually want to sell on. They want to sell on the innocence of that childish excitement when video games are announced, spoken about, and shown. It's that part of you that those things appeal to. They appeal to your creative side. They appeal to the side of nostalgia that you have. And so that's the part of your mind that usually responds real quickly. So we do things like we pre-order, and I have done that. We do things like we buy cosmetics, and I've done that. We do things like we justify identify games that need to be held to higher standards. I've done that. And so I think the lesson that we need to learn is that we need to now continue to be much more scrutinizing of every single thing that is put out our way. And to be very honest with you, I want to just commend most of the gamers right now, because they are doing so. They are really taking the gaming developers and publishers to task. And developers and publishers are not the bad guys all the time. To be very honest, there are developers and publishers that do right by their communities every single moment of the day, and they will continue to do right by their communities, or they will quit making games altogether. And there are many of them that are existent in the industry. I can name names, but you already know those names in some sense, except maybe you've just had bad luck playing a whole bunch of terrible games. And if that's your case, man, we need to recommend you a list of some really good games, because I've been recommended a list of good games by my community members here. Now, another thing too is, is also being this age, there is a little bit more disposable income that's available to this age demographics. And so we are easier convinced to part with our money in some sense, because, I don't expect many 18-year-olds to pay for a collector's edition of a game. I mean, maybe there are 18-year-olds that are just, they're loaded and they can pay, or maybe they're 19-year-olds, or maybe the college age students who are from 18 to about 24 years. Perhaps there's some of them that can pay $120-$140 for a collector's edition, or maybe $250 for a collector's edition. But I'm not really expecting that demographic to do that kind of spending. I think it's more our demographics that have more of a disposable income, because compared to a college person, most likely you're going to see that because of the education level, the experience level, a lot of gamers that are in that 35 years and older are able to be making much more money, and so having, naturally having a higher disposable income. I'm not saying this is the case for everybody. I'm just saying, on a general sense, if all things were, all fine and beautiful and dandy, this is what you're most likely going to see. And so another thing too to consider with that in mind is, how gamers, look at their investment in terms of games, because these gaming companies, they make money off the back of a lot of the, off their consumers, their fans, their loyalists, and sometimes they are appreciative and sometimes they don't care, and they show that they don't care by their actions. And so one way that I feel like gamers can really benefit either way is gamers that are investors in a lot of these companies, because there are some gamers that are heavy investors in gaming companies. There's a book written by someone, I can't remember the name of the book, but I think it was the preface or the foreword of the book, it said something along the lines of, somebody whose parents, always smoked this brand of cigarettes. And this is a terrible example, but it's the one I remember off the top of my head. And they smoke these brands of cigarettes every day. They smoke like a packet a day, and, they smoked it for 20 something years. And at the end of the day, they eventually just died average people. But then you find other people who are smart, who are also consumers of those products, but instead of smoking a pack a day, they smoke like half a pack. They split the pack of cigarettes between their mom and dad, and then they invested the remaining money into this tobacco company for about the same number of years, and then by the time they were retired, they were well off. I think there are a lot of gamers that fall into the second category who are also investing in these gaming companies, especially knowing a lot of the gaming companies and knowing how their behavior is. And this is where I want to be really careful, because this can get really dicey. But you being a gamer, you already know who's making quality games. You already know who's making the right decisions. You already know who's making the game-changing decisions, and you'll bet on them with your $60, $120. And some of you are betting on them with a lot more. Some of you are investor class gamers. You're not just gamers who pick up the controller. You're gamers who control the game and control a lot of what's going on. And I think that second category is what a lot of gamers probably may need to be looking into. And I think this is going to now affect their decisions much more, because now they're playing on the front end where they see a game, they see all the marketing, they see all the hype, but now they're looking deeper than that, because they're like, okay, I have a few, not just $60 in a game in like the little, plastic container CD disc. That's the sound of what that sounds like here on my desk. But instead they're looking at things from a financial perspective, where they're investing and they're looking at their returns. And if they know that, a publishing firm doesn't really have the interest of the customers, then they know exactly where to take not just their, $60 investment, but their investment that might be part of a financial portfolio to another company, and now start looking carefully for companies that show promise, companies that are hungry for excellence, and then start to support these companies. I think this is where the next step of the average gamer lies. We're not just going to be, I think talking about how these games did this and how these games did that, I think that is a little mundane after a while. I think we now have the huge monetary power to really control a lot of our circumstances and a lot of the circumstances within gaming, because gamers are a passionate bunch. Gamers will transfer the appreciation of games to their children or to the young ones around them. And if we're doing that, we're giving them this legacy. What legacy are we going to be giving to our kids? Is it going to be a legacy of, half-baked games filled with microtransactions, poor business practices, greed, and, people who just want to line their pockets? And there's nothing wrong with making more money, but are you going to make the money on price gouging tactics, or are you going to make the money based on a wonderfully crafted relationship between your audience? So this video is to call gamers to a higher sense of responsibility. And what that means is going to be different for everybody else. What that means for me is going to be very different than, what it means for you, because I'm on the content creator side. You are, if you're listening to this video and you're not a content creator, then, you're more on a different side of, things where you also have an advantage. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes I'm on a content creator side, and I'm a small channel. Nobody calls me up and says, hey, here's a copy of this game. Well, I've gotten some of those, but nobody calls me up for the big games and says, hey, here's a copy of this game. So I have to go in there and I have to commit my money to kind of see what's going on and then inform an audience on what that is, which you guys are nice enough to click the video, so it's well worth it. It's a wonderful transaction, in my opinion. Those clicks, they cover the cost of those games over time, and all of that. So that's not like a problem, but I'm just saying sometimes I go, make that commitment, and then it's like, this bit me in the finger, because it's like a rabid monster sometimes, where you're trying to throw your money in the mouth of a crocodile, or a shark, in whatever analogy you want to use that for. So I think this Fallout 76 issue it's not being reported. Or maybe it's just been oversaturated in the news, that gamers just don't care anymore, because that's another thing too, the oversaturation, everybody talking about how everything is so bad, that just really clouds everybody's judgment. And then another thing too is, even with people being dissatisfied with the new games, I also want to call a lot of attention to a lot of older games that we may have skipped because we follow all these gaming news sites and all that. We're easy to go into the hype and then put aside beautiful gems in terms of well-crafted games that were made along the lines of games who had a AAA budget, who had a huge marketing budget, and so they made so much more noise. We didn't get to see the really good games because they were masked under a lot of the marketing and noise. So looking out for those games and seeking those games will probably be something that a lot of gamers can do and enjoy. Now, all what I'm saying, a lot of you might be like, we're already doing this, and that's great. We just need more people to continue to do this as well. And then finally, indie studios are much more important than they were, yesterday, because the more independent studios can continue to make good games, and the more that they can continue to receive support, I think it's going to continue to spread our resources. It's going to continue to challenge the big companies, because the business models that a lot of companies use would determine their future. So if you build on sand, you're going to get the rewards and the result. But if you continue to help these indie studios, you will find the ones that are wanting to work on integrity, that are wanting to work with their consumers, that want to treat their customers and their clients with respect. And so now is the time to seek them out, because they don't really have the noise budget. Many of them don't have the marketing budget that they need. I mean, look at Remnant from the Ashes. A lot of people said, yeah, the game had some bugs and some glitches. The game was made by a small studio, published by a small publisher, but the game, I don't think, has the number or amount of bugs that Fallout 76 has. The game is actually a better experience so far than Fallout 76, and yet the game is just very obscure. Very, very little publicity, because they didn't use the regular marketing chains, because that's most likely something that the publisher would have had to, deal with in terms of finances and how we're going to market a game like this. They just did the traditional good old marketing, word of mouth. And, the game, in my opinion, is a success. Now, was it a success for them in terms of financial success? I don't know. But to me, I feel like in today's day and age, a successful game is a game that actually comes out and launches well, that launches in a good state, that launches in a way where players can enjoy it, that has innovation to it, and a game that is not just any kind of generic content. I think Remnant, even though it looked like an old game, there's an old game that was out back in the day. I can't remember the name. I still think it was a fresh idea in today's, pool of a lot of generic stuff that we have these days. So this is just my little opinion piece that I wanted to make. I'm not in the mood, or I don't see any benefit of bashing anybody, who makes a poor decision. We've all made poor decisions. We've received consequences for most of them. So we'll let the chips, or how do they say it? Let the chips fall as they may, or let the cards fall as they may, or whatever it is. But I feel like gamers are much empowered if they start taking steps to start looking at themselves as much more of controllers than people who are being controlled or being pushed to react in certain ways. I think we have much more power than we are actually aware of. Like, it's crazy. I mean, if you look at the way market forces work, especially now with these gaming companies seeing how easy it is for share prices to just drop because players just say, you know what, you've not done a good job, so we're not going to give you our money, or we're going to play your game even if you make a good game, but we'll buy it at a discount. And so they just hold off on their money and wait till there's a discount and buy it. And gaming companies are starting to see that if they're going to want to be selling $60 games right out off the pop, they need to do the work that is, that's entailed, and not just make a $60 free to play model game and then put it out there and expect for people to just come running into it. Gone are those days. There are too many games now, too many old games that are very good, and people have enough entertainment to keep them busy until, a lot of these publishers and developers sort themselves out. So that's all I have for today. Thank you very much for your time and audience. Let me hear what you think in the comment section below. This is just a conversational video. I want to hear what you guys have to say. I'll be reading comments. I'll reply the ones that I'm able to reply. And I guess I'll see you in the next video. Peace.